Hello everyone, this is Tim with Paintball Tek. Got a rebuild video for you guys today. This is a requested video of a ANS GenX-II or GX-II regulator. This was probably the most common reg to come out of ANS for many years, and it's found kind of all over the old autococker world, for the most part. So just going to give you a quick breakdown and show you how to pull it apart, which seals you can replace, and how to lube it. So, without further ado, now there's a couple different versions of this reg. The older, I believe the older style had two long set screws that would lock the adjustment knob in place, and I believe this is a newer model or a later model that has a locking ring. This is basically a tournament lock, so that once you set your pressure, you lock the ring in place so you can't move the reg on the fly and change your velocity. So, whichever one you have, the rebuild is basically the same. The components on the inside are basically the same. If your ring is locked, use a crescent wrench to unlock this. And if this is stuck, you can use a 3/16 wrench on the bottom to loosen it up and unscrew the bottom cap, which is your pressure adjustment screw. This comes off, sets aside. Inside you will have your spring pack, which this is a Belleville spring pack, but it's all contained on this little rod and washer, so you shouldn't have any issues losing the springs. You can basically just set that inside your adjuster. Now, inside here is the main reg piston. It's a brass piston, and it also has a overpressure relief valve built into it. So usually you can kind of whack it on a table, get it to come out like that. This one has a single O-ring on the outside, but it also has this hex hollow lock here on the bottom. And inside this cylinder, there's a flat polyurethane disc, a washer, well, actually more of a puck, and then a spring, and then the screw here. This is basically meant as an overpressure relief valve, so if the pressure gets too high in the reg, it'll bleed out down through this little tiny hole here in the top of the piston head, and this spring will release the pressure and allow it to bleed out the bottom of the regulator. If you have an issue where you've rebuilt the reg and you've replaced this O-ring and oiled it properly, and you still have a leak out the bottom of the reg, it'll leak out the bottom of this hole here, chances are that the polyurethane flat piece inside here is either damaged or disintegrated, and that's what's causing your leaking issue. This can be pulled apart. You can grab this with a vice grip, or a, put it in a vise with some rubber, and it will come apart like this. Here, I'll set this one aside. I've got one here that I've already taken apart. The nut here on the bottom is usually Loctited, so I've got one here. So that's the housing. Here is the poly disc. It's just a thin stamped polyurethane disc. Then there is this little silver push plate, the spring, and the hollow lock. So that's how this piece comes apart. So if you don't have any leaking issues, like I said before, don't bother taking this apart. If you do take it apart for whatever reason, when you put this all back together, take the screw and stick it in flush with the bottom of the brass right here. That's basically where they set them from the factory, so that's where I always put them back to. So anyway, that is that part. Now for the top of the reg, if this isn't loose, you can use a crescent wrench And there's wrench flats here. Loosen up the top from the bottom section. Usually, if you don't have any creep issues where the reg is overpressurizing, you don't really need to take this apart. But for purpose of the video, I'm going to take it apart and show you what's inside. In here you have a large O-ring around the outside, the reg seat puck, which sits in this housing here, and then on the top of the reg is a small pin and spring. So there's the assembly all laid out. Now, if you do have an overpressurizing problem where the reg is just basically letting your tank pressure flow through, it's not regulating pressure at all, chances are either this pin is damaged or bent, or this reg seat is damaged or disintegrated because it's old. Either way, these reg seats are still available, I believe, through ANS.com, or ANS Gear, I should say, .com. So you can order it from them and get a replacement for it. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and replace the O-rings on this system that can be replaced. Obviously you have the one on top here, which is a standard tank ring. It's a 015. Is that one a new 015? That can be a 70 or a 90 duro. I'm going to put the pin back inside here, spring side first. The puck on this one is good, so we're not going to touch it. But all you need to do is basically take a pick and pop it out, and there's a little groove where that puck will reseat once you put a new one in. This large O-ring around the outside, which also very rarely needs to get replaced, is a 116. There. Then those two halves can be screwed back together. Careful to make sure that the pin goes through the center of the puck when you push these pieces back together. That O-ring is just a static O-ring that seals. It doesn't really need grease or oil. But actually, I like to put a little bit of oil on it just to keep it sort of fresh. Not a ton. Like I said, these parts don't normally come apart that often, only if you're having an issue. Then on the piston here on the bottom, take this O-ring off. These are old and cracked. Replace it with a brand new number 12, 012. Then this gets oil. And you just drop it back in with the point side first. Spring pack goes in after that. And the adjustment screw goes in on the bottom. Make sure to wipe off any excess oil on the outside, and your reg will be ready to go for its next application. The other thing about this reg is it does have 4 ports on it. The 2 ports, if the reg is vertical like this, the 2 ports that are lower, right here and right here, are input ports. So those are the ones that you want to have your macro line fitting or plug in. The 2 upper ports, here and here, are output ports. So normally you would have either 2 plugs or a gauge and a plug, because it's going to be the same on either side. Or in some cases, they would have a gauge on one side and a hollow lock screw with a burst disc underneath it just in case the system overpressurized. It had a double redundancy, the one in the piston on the bottom and the burst disc on the top here. I'm not entirely sure what this is rated for. I would guess it's probably 1800, but either way. So there you go. Now you know how to rebuild them. Have a good day.